pray. Lord, may the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts and the celebrations of our spirits be acceptable in your sight, God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. When the old-time vaudevillian comedian W.C. Fields was dying in 1946, his good friend, another old-time comedian named Groucho Marx, went to see him. And he found W.C. Fields in bed, very, very sick, and poring over a Bible. Now this surprised Groucho because W.C. Fields led a life that really colored outside the lines. And he was an avowed atheist. He would have nothing to do with any kind of talk about faith or Bibles or God or anything like that. And yet here he was on his deathbed poring over a Bible. And so Groucho Marx, in telling the story, he said to him, "Bill, what are you looking for?" And W.C. Fields reportedly said, "Loopholes, loopholes." Now, whether this is true or not, it points to an uncomfortable truth. Even though laws and rules and procedures and just common sense are part of everyone's daily lives, we tend to look for loopholes. We tend to look for that word, kinda. As if, I'm kinda doing that. You know, the exact letter of the law is supposed to include intent, but clever people can usually find ways around it that enables them still to tell themselves, "Oh yeah, I'm following the rules. Everybody should." I know a family named the Carlsons. That's what I'm going to call them, the Carlsons. And they're big. They're a great big family, and they love to play cards. And boy, they know all kinds of card games, and hanging out with them and having a meal with them is a lot of fun. First of all, because it's a lot of people, and they're nuts, and they like to sing. They actually sing as a family, so if you go over to their house, you're going to sing. It's just expected, you know. But sooner or later, they're going to take out the cards, and they're going to teach you some game, and they're going to start playing. But one of the loopholes in the card game, no matter what the card game is that in the Carlson family, you can cheat if you can get away with it. That's the important part, if you can get away with it. Now, the oldest son, a guy named Pat, was notorious for playing cards really, really well, or so it seemed. One time after a game, all of a sudden his sister said, "Pat, get up." And Pat's like, "What?" And the other rule was if you accused anybody of cheating and they weren't cheating, you had to leave the table. So Mary called him out. Pat stood up and said, "What are you talking about?" He must have had 20 cards under his seat where he was sitting, you know. So he was busted. That was pretty funny. And I remember another loophole, and this one I did myself. Back in the early days of computer wiring in schools, now think about that for a minute. There didn't used to be a wireless network in schools. It used to literally be a cable, like a phone cable, but a little bit fatter, that you had to plug in to the computer and run the cord somewhere and then plug it into the wall. Now, you couldn't do it on the floor with children in the room. That was nuts. That was asking for trouble. So my idea was, I looked up at the ceiling in every classroom in this building, and every one of them had those tiles that look kind of like that, but when you push on them, they go up in the ceiling. You know what I'm talking about, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, we'll run them up through there. Well, I ran one of them like that, and the fire marshal showed up the next day and came down to my room, and he said, "Come here with me." And so I go down with him, and he said, "You may not do that. You may not run cables through the ceiling." And I said, "But they're not electric. There's no power going through them." Well, he didn't totally understand computer wiring, and the rule was, there's no cable running through those ceilings. So I said, okay. So then he left. And then I looked at it like that. And I started thinking about it. You know those little cross pieces like that? You know how when you push up the pieces, the cross pieces stay there? You know what I'm talking about? And you know what those gigantic paper clips look like? I mean the big black ones, where you squeeze on the end of it, it could hold a whole stack of paper. Did you ever notice how if you push the cable up and you put one of those on there and it has these little rings that hang down? And so I would do that, and then I would run the wiring through those so that it was hanging down from the ceiling about this far. I called it plunket wiring. Needless to say, somebody called the fire marshal, and he came back and he took me to that room again. I thought I told you you could not put cables through the ceiling. I said, "They're not in the ceiling, they're about an inch below it." He glared at me. He stood there, he walked up and down, looked at the ceiling, and then he left. After that, I wired every room in that school with plunket wiring. Then I got calls from other teachers, other tech people in other schools. Plunkett, how did you do the wiring? And so, of course, I showed them. So pretty soon, the school where I worked was kind of in trouble with the fire marshal, but we were following the letter of the law. The cable was not in the ceiling. I read that rule before I came up with that idea. But you got to admit that is a loophole. I admit it. And I confess that when I hear the word loophole, it makes my lip curl with disgust, although I do pat myself on the back for being so clever so long ago. But I associate that word with people who will follow the letter of the law and also find a way around it. Polluters and tax cheats immediately come to mind when I think of loopholes. There's all kinds of stuff all over the place that's kind of dangerous because people follow the letter of the law, but there's loopholes that allow them to pollute Texas and other places in all kinds of perfectly legal ways. And it always astounds me, none of the people who are doing the polluting live anywhere near this stuff. Have you ever noticed that? So our beautiful state can get messed up just like that. So sometimes loopholes can literally put people's lives at risk. Sometimes they can get around, cranky fire inspectors who don't understand computer wiring. And sometimes they can cause social changes in the entire state. Let me give you another example. Raise your hand if when you were a kid and you went to school, you started on the day after Labor Day. Remember that? That was just how it was, wasn't it? We started the day after Labor Day. There was never a day when that didn't happen because it was always right near my birthday. One year I had my birthday on Labor Day, and then the next day we started school. There were a lot of years where I had my birthday on the first day of school. That kind of stunk. I didn't much like that. But that was how it was back in the day. Now, that got changed around a lot. A lot of people started in August, but the problem was a lot of schools were starting whenever they jolly well wanted to. So when school reform began, the first law that got put on the books back in the 80s was everybody starts the day after Labor Day. And the first year of that law, everybody started on the first day, and everybody showed up on the first day. That was the part that was nice. It was none of those where, I didn't know we started here 3 weeks after school had started. They would show up the day after Labor Day. That happened a lot. Everybody showed up on the first day of school. That was great. The problem was the very next year, districts began applying for waivers. That was the loophole in the law. You could apply for a waiver. So the law was everybody starts on the day after Labor Day unless you apply for a waiver. Well, the next year, you can imagine how many schools did not start on the day after Labor Day. And so pretty soon we were back to the same pattern that existed back in the 80s, where everybody just started whenever they jolly well wanted to. And then the state of Texas, in its great wisdom and knowledge, decided, by gum, we're going to pass another law. And this time it's going to be everybody starts on the fourth Monday in August. That was what the Texas House of Representatives wrote in their law. The Senate wrote, everybody starts on the last Monday in August. Did you just hear the difference between the two sentences that I said? The House wrote fourth Monday in August. The Senate wrote last Monday in August. Nobody noticed. So the first year, it wasn't a problem. Everybody started on the fourth Monday in August, which also happened to be the last Monday in August. Guess what happened the next year? You had a fourth Monday in August, and then you had a fifth Monday in August, because August is 31 days, and that's just how it works. And so the state was screaming bloody murder, but the districts were going, wait a minute. It says right here that we can start on this day if we want to. Then they added, wait for it, another loophole. Now, after they fixed that one, by the way, now it's the fourth Monday in August, by gum. That's what it is. But they've added, you can now get a waiver if you declare yourself to be a district of innovation. If you are a school district of innovation, you can start the school year whenever you want to. Would you care to guess the percentage of school districts in Texas that are officially considered to be school districts of innovation? 85%. 85%. So that is why when school starts sometime in August, perhaps after Labor Day, perhaps not, that's why all that happens. And all of it is because of that magical, beautiful word, loopholes. I think this kind of stuff galled Jesus. I think that's why he was so adamant during his Sermon on the Mount by insisting that there was intent behind the laws that were given to the people. He was explaining and teaching and clarifying and fulfilling the law that had been given to the people of God so lovingly. But Jesus followed an interesting pattern in this part of his sermon. First, he repeated the well-known parts from the Ten Commandments that everybody knew. Everybody knew them. But then he followed it with intent, how it was supposed to be done. Listen again to what Jesus said. You have heard, you shall not murder. Okay, that's one of the commandments. But I tell you, anyone who is angry will be subject to judgment. Jesus wondered about murderous intent in our hearts. Ask yourself, and don't lie to yourself, ask yourself, how angry have you ever been in your lifetime? Have you ever been so enraged that somebody's life might actually be in danger? How about on the freeway when you're driving a machine that weighs several thousand pounds? I mean, come on. I admit I've had some problems with my temper in my lifetime. And I'm not going to tell you, oh, it's all gone because I'm a minister. No, I don't think so. That's not a fair statement. That would be a lie. Maybe I'm getting better at it as I get older, but my temper is something I fight with all the time. Have I ever been mad enough to murder somebody? I'm not sure I want to answer that question. But there's a couple of times I'm very uncomfortable thinking about in my past. Yeah, but I haven't actually murdered anyone. Don't worry, God, I haven't killed anybody yet. I mean, how lucky have we been that we never got the opportunity? Did it keep us from violating that commandment? That is what Jesus is saying. Then he went on and he tackled two very uncomfortable subjects. You have heard, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks lustfully at another has already done so. The whole thinking in our head kind of thing. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. Jesus said intent is where the problem comes in. Then he went on to say, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. Now, both those statements pointed to how easy it was in the days of Jesus to break the commandment against adultery. In the days of Jesus, guess who broke it more than anybody? The religious authorities. The people who were supposed to be enforcing the rules, and they did. Oh, they did. On the common people. They are the ones who came up with the idea of a certificate of divorce. You don't like your wife? All you got to do is give her a certificate of divorce, and she has to go back to her father's house. It's as simple as that. Never says anything about what if you're an idiot? What if you beat your wife? What if you're mean to her? What if you just aren't any good? What if you can't stop looking at the girls in the neighborhood? Doesn't say anything about the wives. That's where the intent comes in. In fact, the intent here is completely missing. The religious authorities used to have multiple families at some cases. Sometimes those families were hidden, and sometimes they were not hidden. And yet they would enforce the rule of adultery on common people who sometimes it just didn't work out. We're human beings. Yeah, we're supposed to go into marriage and we're supposed to be honored, but sometimes, folks, it doesn't happen. And if you don't believe that, then talk to me about why my dad was married to my stepmother for 38 years and was married to my mother for 22. That's a tough thing. It's something I've wrestled with for a long time. So when I read this part, I think about intent. I think about intent. Jesus wanted us to look at ourselves. Now, maybe it was harsh for the religious authorities to hear. I mean, Jesus didn't exactly pull punches when he talked to them in the first place, did he? But he was saying maybe, just maybe, divorce needed to be handled in a different way in order to preserve the moral authority and especially the intent of the law. And you've also heard, don't break your vows, but I tell you, fulfill all the vows you make. And don't bother swearing by the Lord or by heaven or by earth or by your head. We all know a few people who mean what they say and say what they mean, don't we? We can count on them. They don't lie. They tell the truth. We know that if they make a promise, they will move heaven and earth to make sure that promise is fulfilled. To people like this, even swearing on a Bible in court is a waste of time. Because if you ask them a question, you're going to get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Doesn't matter if they swear by God or not. Those are people who are impeachable witnesses. They just could be counted on. You get the truth out of them just the way the Lord intended for all his children to be. Swearing by a whole list of other things almost makes the one doing the swearing sound like a liar. You know, oh, I swear on my mother's grave. I swear by the lives of my children. I swear on my father's good name. None of that stuff impresses most folks. It's just flowery. Just sounds dramatic, like you ought to be doing it on a stage in the middle of a play or something. It doesn't mean that your words mean anything. Like Jesus said, when you say yes, mean yes. When you say no, mean no. And I'll throw in one more. If you don't know, then say, I don't know. Boy, sometimes I wish some of those politicians running for president, when they get a question, they'd say, you know what, I don't know. I'm going to work on that one. Oh, boy, that would get my attention right away. I don't know if it would get my vote, but it would definitely get my attention. If this is done, if the truth is said that way, there can be no loophole for the truth to hide in. One final word on intent. We just finished celebrating Valentine's Day on Friday. Were there any loopholes in your expression of love to one another? Oh, I hope not. If so, then all the rules and the laws in the world are not going to help, are they? They're not going to help at all. On the other hand, if your love was expressed honestly, openly, and completely to someone that you love, loopholes are unnecessary, right? Love is why the Lord gave us commandments to follow, and love is why we're supposed to keep them, not with loopholes. Amen.